Okay, thank you very much, Gennaro, for inviting me. And yes, as Gennaro has anticipated, I'd like to work together a bit. So if you wouldn't mind, you can actually get pen and paper and put your thoughts down for this one. So I worked for many years in the care and treatment of gender diverse people. I'm a philosopher by background, mainly with children, but today we're going to talk rather on the case of the adults. As you know, there has been a call, at least since 2010, to demedicalize gender dysphoria or gender identity disorder by the Council of Europe and then received by the World Professional Association for Transgender Health. And the ICD-11 will remove gender identity disorder from the list of mental disorders and will be renamed gender incongruence. So there is this idea, it's not a disorder, it's diversity. But the problem that this gives rise to is, if gender diversity is not an illness, will people lose their entitlement to medical care? Indeed, can we still talk about medical care? And we know that there are invasive bodily modifications and very costly, going back to what Jordan was saying, very, very costly, very expensive. These procedures are currently regarded as legitimate, both ethically and at law, because there is an illness or a disorder, there's a medical necessity. I don't know whether you have come across a few days ago with a body artist, a tattooist, who has been convicted for gross bodily harm for removing ears of consenting patients. The patients haven't complained, and splitting tongues. There have been various reasons why he was sent to jail. One was that he was not a doctor, but another one was that consent is not a defense against gross bodily harm. So no matter whether the patient is an autonomous agent or is consenting to your operation, if there is no medical necessity in England, you are trespassing the patient. It's a bodily assault. And obviously the other question is, well, if there is no illness, should people pay for these things? Now, here, imagine, therefore, let's take for granted that gender dysphoria, transsexualism, gender diversity is not an illness. We take this call seriously, and therefore you have gender diverse people coming to your clinics together with a number of other patients. And here we've got two groups. In one group you've got relatively rare requests, felines, body artists. You know, this woman has taken a number of surgeries because she preferred looking like a cat. There's been a trend of people wanting to look like Star Trek characters, requesting silicone implants. I'd be very interested to know if that's actually happened to you. Our split tongues. Then, you know, Valeria Lukianova, you might have seen, this is actually a real person. She underwent a number of surgeries to look like Barbie. Then Herbert Chabets has had over 20 surgical interventions to look like Superman. Orlan was one of the first carnal artists who wanted to look like Mona Lisa. Sterlakis, an Australian body artist, he had to shop around quite a lot to find a plastic surgeon willing to transplant a ear into his forearm. And he made a fantastic career as a body artist. So none of these people ever regretted any of their operations. And of course, I mean, for those who are familiar with Italian literature, Gabriele D'Annunzio is known for having obtained, although there might be a legend, having obtained the removal of his two bottom ribs to please himself sexually. And talking about ribs, of course, the first cosmic intervention of plastic surgery was conducted by God when he removed the rib of Adam to create the woman. A clearly medically unnecessary procedure performed on Adam, who then complains to God in this vignette, please give me my rib back and take her back. Okay, so you've got this number of patients coming to your clinic. And I'm interested in discussing together what, we don't have to do it now, but you know, if you want to take a note of the factors that you would take into consideration before saying yes or no. So I put some down. There isn't really a right or wrong answer here, just the sort of things that you would think of as surgeons would interest me. So how long the person has wanted to look like a cat or Superman, or even children, or likelihood to achieve the desired result, to really look like a cat or to really become Superman. Okay, then you've got a second group of patients, less infrequent requests. A number of Asian women are requesting, as far as I know, blepharoplasty to look more Caucasian. For similar reasons, skin bleaching is requested by women, particularly of Afro-African descent and Asian descent, to look like more Caucasian. And the same procedure, of course, can be applied for other reasons. Then you've got a woman who's requesting breast implant because she sees a dress is too small. Breast implant, post-operative cancer treatment. Gender-affirming treatment. Labia. Rhinoplasty. Okay, it's less infrequent requests. Again, I'd be interested in knowing how often you see these things. And now, again, a little exercise here. I put some of these things on the right-hand side, and then be interested to match whether breast implant post-cancer treatment you regard as ethically justified or just weird or ethically suspect. Yeah, okay, so I presume, so that's my guess, that most of us would regard breast implant post-cancer treatment as ethically legitimate, whereas skin bleaching and other racial mitigating surgeries as ethically suspect. But the same procedures, when there is a condition like skin pigmentation, ethically justified perhaps, feline sarcrex and other varieties, they're just weird and they're affirming, probably ethically justified with some proviso, maybe breast surgery is okay. When we talk about pitch, voice, or other laser hair removal, maybe not. But overall, ethically justified. So, if we had to put 1 to 6, can we try and assign a number to what we are most inclined to do, and number 6, what we're least inclined to do? In our head or down on paper. And again, I think that my guess is that for most of us, including me, I would put a 1 on breast implant after cancer care, maybe 2 or 3 for skin bleaching, for pigmentation, 1 or 2 for gender affirming. I'd have problems with eyelid surgery or skin bleaching for mitigating racial features. Labia reduction and felines, I'd be more inclined to say, well, these are not really priorities. But are we thinking in the right way here? Is there anyone who's largely in disagreement with the analysis so far? No hands raised. Okay, so I think that sounds pretty, common sense. But the way I've been thinking about it when I started thinking about this, and so for some reason a film came to mind. Has anyone seen Sliding Doors, 1998? Has anyone not seen it? Okay, so just that the plot is Helen leaves work earlier one day, and she goes home. She makes her way home. She goes to the tube. She misses. She catches the train. She catches a carriage. She arrives home and she finds her partner in bed with a lover. And so she leaves the partner and their life goes in a certain way. In the other scenario, so the film is split into 2. In the other scenario, still narrated in the film, she misses the train. When she arrives home, the lover is gone. So she stays with the partner, obviously she remains ignorant about the affair. And the film presents these two parallel lives in a time paradox, in a paradoxical time overlap. So, I think that this is a case in which if we go from common premises and from arguments that we can actually agree on, we will see that the outcomes of our thinking can radically diverge. So, Journey 1. The arguments of Journey 1 are these. And we can largely, I think, agree about this. Gender is partly biological, and it's not just a biological fact. It's also a social construct to some extent. Gender diverse people suffer less in less supportive environment. Gender dissatisfaction is also a function of societal inability to contemplate different gender identities. And therefore, gender dissatisfaction is in some ways similar to other forms of body dissatisfaction about size, ethnicity, weight, and so on. Both result, to some extent at least, from social conditioning and social norms. The ethical implications of this for doctors are this. Medicine shouldn't reinforce stereotypes. Doctors should not be accomplices of discrimination based on the way people look. Doctors should refuse to comply to unnecessary bodily harm. And therefore, at least from the arguments around social stereotypes or social norms, it is actually much less controversial to satisfy the requests to be Star Trek or Feline or Barbie than the others. These are not likely or less likely to be based on suspect norms of moral acceptability. And then there is an argument about equality as non-discrimination, or people should be treated with equal concern and respect. It would be discriminatory to pay for the state to pay for some of these procedures but not others. It is unethical to manufacture illnesses and to say some of these patients are eligible because what they suffer from is a medical condition, is a disorder. That's an illness manufacturing, and then we could proliferate, we could have an ethnic disorder, age dysmorphic disorder, and so on, to justify what we like justifying. So if doctors decide to agree to any of these procedures, this should be seen as private transactions. So the conclusions of this journey are, the requests that seem more intuitively ethically acceptable are the least legitimate. Group 2 are based on suspected norms of social acceptability. In some cases, these norms are inherently sexist and racist, and often condemn women and ethnic minorities or gender minorities to psychological hardship and otherwise unnecessary medical procedures. There's something happened here in Swedish. Vitika uppada teringana. Now the argument is that we could do like many journeys, but we'll only do 2. So in this other scenario, we actually catch the train. And the premises, we agree, are the same. Gender is not just a biological fact, there are social factors. So gender dissatisfaction, we can agree, is a function partly of societal inability to contemplate different genders, but people shouldn't be denied treatment that benefit them. Yes, society should change, but that doesn't mean that individuals shouldn't receive medical treatment. And this applies to everyone. Gender diverse people, felines, Star Trek, people applying for ethnic surgeries. If it could benefit them, that's what matters. So the ethical implications for doctors. Yes, medicine shouldn't reinforce stereotypes and normality. Yes, doctors shouldn't be accomplices of discrimination based on aesthetic standards. Yes, you should refuse to comply to unnecessary bodily harm. However, in these cases, in all of these cases, it is not clear that bodily harm is actually unnecessary. There could be a case of harm minimization to make. And yes, well, people should be treated with equal concern and respect, and we shouldn't pay for some based on the idea that some are illnesses and others are not. However, not all the conditions listed earlier are on a par just because they're all not pathologies. They could all be not pathologies, they could all be unusual, they could all be partly socially constructed, but it doesn't follow from this that they're all the same and should be treated the same. Moreover, if the state can't pay for all the requests, it doesn't mean it shouldn't pay for any of them. And how about medical necessity? In this journey, one of the conclusions is not being an illness is normatively irrelevant. Disability rights activists and theorists say that not being able to walk is a different ability. But this doesn't impede obtaining NHS treatment, wheelchair, physiotherapy through the NHS or through insurance schemes. The state funds regularly treatments on psychosocial grounds, infertility treatment, surgery for bad ears, hormonal treatment for excessive or retarded growth. These are all given on psychological grounds or to align a person's body to a social standard of normality. So if we accept all of this, we have no reason in principle to accept all others, however weird they appear to us. So the conclusion of the journey too looks somehow like this. Agreeing to treatment might not only be ethically justified, but even morally required under the rule of rescue. There might be norms in place, social norms, but it is not doctors who should police people's requests. Now, both scenarios, and we could imagine 3 or 4 of these other journeys, seemingly offer plausible arguments for and against providing treatment, and particularly funded treatment for gender diversity and other conditions relating to one's appearances. But what is more important than the conclusion is what these parallel railways might tell us. The methodology of thinking, I think, is more important than what we actually conclude. The film Sliding Doors was based on a film that was actually censored, and it was released in 1981 in Poland. The film at the beginning of the film, the protagonist Witek runs to catch a train to Warsaw. In the run, he bumps into an old man who is drinking a beer. The old man spills the beer. Witek runs anyway, catches the train. On the train, he meets a communist, gets to Warsaw, enrolls the Communist Party, he gets in jail, and so on. In the second scenario, he apologizes very quickly and misses the train, and on the platform, he meets a woman who is a university student, he enrolls in university, becomes an anti-communist, and so on. So the film split in 3. And from the point in which he decides whether or not to apologize to the man on the platform, his life takes significantly different directions. So basically his life depends on whether or not he apologizes for spilling the beer. So the moral of the story seems to me the most important thing, and it's obvious as it is disquieting. Accidental facts beyond our control, combined with the moral choices that we make, or others make around us, can radically change our life. This incontrovertible truth often goes unnoticed, and the films bring it to light and compel us to think about the moral responsibilities that we bear when the moral actors are us. People happen to be born black or short, or fat, or transgender in different societies, in Sweden or in England or in Thailand, where both society and the medical profession might make a number of diverse choices around the way they look and their identity. The choices that we make can thus have a number of splayed consequences depending on the context in which they're situated. And it becomes imperative, therefore, that we as actors take the course of action that with the insight of the available evidence is likely to promote the best outcome and to minimize the highest risk for those directly concerned. Plastic and cosmetic surgery demands are not likely to decrease. And it seems to me that the ethical grounds for providing treatment is in order that the procedures in question are life-saving, whatever that means to the person concerned, though. Harm minimizing or improving of their quality of life. And no more than this is needed, at least in principle, for felines, Star Trek, or anyone else. Now, of course, how much suffering does one endure if she doesn't become a cat? It's difficult to answer that question. We don't have an evidence base, but we have evidence base, sufficient evidence to say that for many gender diverse people, receiving medical treatment is a life or death matter. There might be a case for rationing policies, perhaps for personalized budgets. I'm very interested to hear from Lars about the rationing. But the compelling reason to offer medical treatment is that it can make a difference between one life that is characterized by hardship and pain and another that is acceptable and overall flourishing, whatever the etiology or the classification of the condition is. Thank you.
Okay, thank you very much, Simona. So we have 20 to 30 minutes to talk now. The audience?
So when will the change in ICD 11 come? Here?
The change doesn't in ICD 11. It's going to be active 2020.
Yeah, not yet. But gender incongruence will feature in a new chapter called Disorders of Sexual Health.
And what will happen in Britain? For transgender people,
It's unlikely that whatever happens in terms of access to treatment will depend on the changes in the ICD. Because in England, it's rather national guidance, national guidelines that shape the understanding of the doctor's obligation. So it's unlikely that people will not receive medical care because it's shifted into a new category and it's no longer called disorder. All the routes of access to treatment through psychiatrists, however, remain the same under the ICD-11. So it's cosmetic, probably, rather than substantive.
That's
If we go back to the discussion we had about autonomy and the hand transplantation, I would say this to go through gender-correcting surgery is completely the opposite. I mean, here we have presumed persons that go through investigation and end up demanding surgery, which is completely different from the situation where we offer you something because you have an obvious damage. And then you say that a lot of the appreciation of who we are is actually a social construct. We have an extremely famous case in Sweden right now, a girl handball player in the national team, who made a very strong statement a couple of months ago in newspapers, so everyone knows about it. Her line of argument was that I have been suffering my entire life. I was adopted to Sweden as a child, which is a disaster. I have brown skin, which is a disaster. I'm lesbian, which is also a disaster. And now I finally found out I'm actually transsexual, which is also a disaster. And that line of argument for me is completely ununderstandable, because being adopted from a poor country to rich would seemingly be a good fit, lucky me. Brown is more beautiful than white. Lesbian we can handle. No man will suffer from that. One or another girl will be happy from it. And therefore the entire line of argument suffers from logics. Wouldn't it be more ethical for the medical, for the doctors and for the medical society to try instead to work on the social aspect, to work on acceptance, rather than the primitive method of cutting and suturing and those kinds of interventions that we are so interested in and try to do?
I think this is not the doctor's job. And it is not the doctor's job to police people's requests. So there are 3 levels of a judgment that a doctor can make in these decisions. And I think 2 are pertaining to your role as a doctor, and 1 is not. 1 is whether what the patient is requesting is medically achievable. So if I come to you for a rhinoplasty and I say I want a tiny French nose, it's your right and your duty to tell me, well, on your face, I can't actually create. So what you are asking me is medically unachievable. It's perfectly within the remit of our job as clinicians. The second one is a more subtle one, and is about my expectations. So I want this French nose, which this time you can provide for me. But this is because I have a body dissatisfaction which I believe will be eased off by this nose. Now, whether the anticipation of what my life will look like to myself, whether the anticipation of my body satisfaction will be post-operatively, is a much more difficult judgment to make. It is still within the remit of the clinical practice. You can still say, I think you will not be satisfied with this operation. Even if I give it to you, I don't think this will actually ease off your dissatisfaction. But then there is a problem, a third problem, which is a judgment around people's values and preferences. And this is, I think, something that is beyond the remit of clinical practice, is where the patient says, this is my experience about my life and about my body. And yes, I might be socially conditioned, but that's not the only life I have, and that's the only life I can live. And that is where I think the doctor must really respect the patient's values, preferences, and history.
More questions? So we have a question from one of the residents. So far, Simona, you have been extremely thoughtful, and you went through all this improving quality of life and comparing different groups within the quality of life. But often clinicians prioritize life-rescuing cases rather than cases in which the purpose of the treatment is to enhance quality of life. Is there any case that you think where improving quality of life should be prioritized to cases of rescuing life or to cases of prolonging life?
Okay, this is a really interesting question. As to the older person, I'm glad you put this here, the prolonging the older person. So, with regard to the question about age, I think that question is the age should not really matter. The rest of our life is equally valuable to all of us and want to continue to live. So if it is about prolonging life or enhancing the quality of life of an older person versus a younger person, I don't think being older should be factored in at all. With regard to the life rescuing, the differentiation between life prolonging and improving quality of life is not as clear, it seems to me, as sometimes we might think it is, because there are some medical interventions, like the case, for example, of people with, there have been a couple of notable cases in England where people wanted a healthy limb amputation. They would rather kill themselves, they would rather go on the railway and have a train to do the job for them. So in those cases, it seems to me that the operation is no less life-saving than a cancer treatment.
Which is the same for many transsexual people as well.
Yeah.
So in that case, the operation, we are shifting to another category. We are shifting that person to the category of life rescuing.
Yeah, and that's the judgment, coming back to the question that you made before. We need to step back and, I think, be really good at, with introspection, differentiate between the analysis of the patient and the analysis of our discomfort because of our own values and judgments that we have about things. Yeah.
Are there any hard data in the rate of, let's say, suicide in the transgender population versus a non-transgender population?
Yes, there are, but I can't remember them on top of my head, so I'll have to get back to you. Yes.
It's here. It's not my laptop. Yes, about 4 times, 5 times. Yeah. The document is the US survey. It was published 3-5 years ago. I will send to you later. They make a comparison between the rate of attempt of suicide in a transgender population versus the non-transgender population. Yeah. I will send the paper to you later. So, next question from the... Okay, so this is 5 Days Memorial. You know the case, New Orleans? So there are often breaches of ethical codes. Human can do mistake or simply act according to one's beliefs, lack of ethical framework, and professional demands. Like, for example, in the case of New Orleans, where the ENT doctor was there in New Orleans, there was all this typhoon, and they had to evacuate the hospital. So the doctor had to take a decision by herself, and the decision was sometimes to cause euthanasia to patients, otherwise they would die in the transportation. So should the physician always be considered culpable for breaching what is considered as an ethical code?
Okay, I think the issue of culpability should really remain as confined as possible to the criminal law and the I would like to see medicine as kept as far away as possible from criminalizing behavior. I'm wary about the law criminalizing doctors' behavior, in other words. When a doctor is considered culpable for a criminal offense for public reasons, it's because the conduct has been in such a gross divergence from what we would expect a medical professional to do that it justifies a criminal conviction. So in cases in which a doctor intentionally causes harm with the intent of causing harm, then I think that's fair that the doctor should be regarded as culpable and that should be within the remit of criminal law. For all other cases in which a doctor has done something which later has determined a complaint in the patient, I think this should continue to remain a private matter between doctor and patient, so private liability. In terms of the breaches of ethical codes should be seen as guidance and not as straitjackets to clinical judgment. And I've seen that this happens sometimes where you've got clinical guidance and then doctors struggle to make individualized decisions in the best interest of the patients because there is clinical guidance which becomes overpowering. So I think doctors should always retain that flexibility and that capability of making a case-by-case, individualized decision in the best interest of the patients and not culpable if something goes wrong.
And this is what happened in New Orleans. So actually in New Orleans, she had to kill something like 9 to 11 people, and because otherwise they would die in the transportation. And she was on the trial, and she was judged not guilty. Yeah. Questions?
Yes.
You said something about that it's not the doctor's decision to make the decisions on what the people think are important, and I guess that feeds into what should the guidelines, what we should or should not do for people, like in the cases of indigenous or eyes, ethnicity. But is there such a forum that could make such a decision?
Is there, sorry? Such?
Is there a forum of people who are the ones who should make these decisions to make those guidelines? Because I think we feel it falls upon us because we live with patients.
Yeah.
Is there a forum with people who are better equipped to make those decisions?
Okay. So one thing that perhaps, I'm glad you asked these questions. I think that as surgeons, as clinicians, you should always bear in mind that it should be your moral and I think legal right, although I don't know Swedish law, to refuse to perform certain operations. By talking to some of you, I have the impression that you are the end chain, the end ring of a chain where you get the patient nearly there in the theater, not knowing the history, and you have to perform an operation. And this seems to me to violate one of your ethical rights to get to know the person and decide whether or not you also want to consent to have to be involved in that procedure. So that's the other side of the coin. There isn't just the patient, there is also the doctor, and I think it's the moral and really right to refuse. I don't believe that there are experts in this field, and I'm wary of ethical committees or ethical groups of so-called experts who sit down and make guidance for everyone else. I think that an individualized decision is the best way to serve the patient's interests. Notwithstanding the existence of clinical guidelines, clinical guidelines we can only have when we have large pools of patients. We won't be able to have clinical guidelines regarding, say, people wanting to look like felines or having split tongues.
Yeah. Jordan, last, do you have anything to add to the discussion?
Sorry.
Do you, Jordan and Lars, do you have anything to add to the discussion, to the questions? Do you agree with everything that Simona is saying?
I think I would add in my talk. So.
You added to the talk, okay. So, we have time for the next one.
Oh.
Yeah. So this is a case, another from adolescents. Eligibility for a specific surgery, for example abdominoplasty, is according to the guidelines in place. It is said that patient A is not eligible for surgery, but at clinical evaluation, a good outcome is foreseen. I see the patient and I think, oh, sorry, you have too little skin on your abdomen, but I think you will be happy anyway. Patient B is eligible for surgery, but for any other reason, at the clinical evaluation, I say, oh, I don't think you will be a good candidate. So, by performing surgery to A, B would not get the surgery. How to act? Follow the criteria that we have, the rules, or infringe the guidelines?
As I just said, I don't think we should be slaves of our guidelines. If the guidelines doesn't apply, the guidance is guidance, as the word suggests, not the law, and should just be a guidance. But that should never blind or overcloud the interest or the individual situation. We know that people respond very differently to drugs. So
that's nice. This is what we try to do with patients. But then other people might look at our choices, and we have to respond to our choices. So we have to respond to the complaint of other group of patients that disagree or are accusing us that we have broken the guidelines.
well, there is you have this problem with patients. In England, as you know, there is a problem that other doctors can report a doctor, a clinician to the General Medical Council for professional investigation, even if no patient complains. So even if there is no complaint, a doctor can be brought to a tribunal, effectively, fitness to practice tribunal of the General Medical Council, because he or she has not abided to the rules, to the clinical guidelines. So you are in a better position that is not as prominent in this country. But I think that's one of the things you have to live with. You have to respond and justify what you've done, and continue to do right by your patients and not by an abstract concept of guidance. It's a cost worth paying the price, I think.
Thank you.
You're welcome.
Thank you very much. We go to the next speaker. Thank you so much.